Hello, and welcome to the Rough Edges podcast with Sarah I. Fox. In this podcast, I will guide you through my faith and mental health journey to dispel the stigma surrounding mental illness and to create an empowering resource for those who wish to discover more about these topics. I pray that this podcast will not only bless you, but that it will bring growth and healing to our communities. Hello, everyone, and this is part 2 of my discussion with Jesse Mercury, host of the Major Pain podcast. If you would like to hear the full discussion, check out part 1 of this episode and then come back for part 2. Now, enjoy your episode.
So it is sort of like a weird gift. And I'm, again, grateful because my disease is so manageable. And I'm speaking for myself here. There's absolutely people that live with things that are so awful that, of course, like if we could remove this from your life, done. We would do it in a second. So I'm speaking for myself. But in my journey, because of the lucky things that have lined up for me, this is where I'm at now, where it's like, yeah, I wouldn't trade my illness to get my 30s back. I am trying to play catch up now, and I do need to slow down because I am worried about flaring myself up from doing too much all the time in this effort to try to catch up for my lost 30s. I did some cool things in my 30s, but most of it was spent in bed. It's a very interesting transition to get that gratitude and then to see how it impacts your entire life and then to talk to other people who have had it and to realize that this is common experience and a way towards happiness that you wouldn't expect.
Yes, absolutely. I agree. And especially, I think it's because we take a lot of things for granted and we don't really realize that until it's challenged or it's gone. And we're just like, I can't live my life the way that I used to, like pre-diagnosis. And now I have to find a new way to manage this condition that I have to learn to live with. So, in learning all of those things, it's like the gratitude does come because it's like, oh, I used to take emotional regulation for granted and now I have to be hyper focused on my mood and and all of those other things. And so I think the gratitude does come through having all of those things challenged that we take for granted on a daily basis.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, so I also wanted to talk about our topic for today, which is men's mental health.
Yeah.
And so, what are your thoughts on the stigma surrounding men expressing their emotions and seeking help for either their mental or physical health?
It is wildly damaging and just really, really harmful. And it's tricky because there's so much pushback against men expressing their emotions. And there's one side that's like, oh, we need you to express your emotions. That's like pushing you to do it. And then there's another side. It's like, oh, you're expressing your emotions. You're not a real man. So how do you navigate that? It's really tricky. And when you're going through any sort of chronic illness challenge or mental health challenge, you need support. We all need support. I have two therapists, a personal therapist and a couples therapist, and they're both amazing and have been incredibly helpful. I'm someone who's very much an open book. My internal monologue is spilling out all the time. I think I'm a man who is less challenged to reveal my emotions and maybe a little more challenged to shut up about it sometimes. But I have run into the stigma and I've run into doctors where it's like, I need help. This thing is happening. And they're like, you just need to suck it up and deal with it, be a man about it or whatever. And it's really, really damaging, not just doctors, but community, friends. I say this quote all the time, but we had a guest, Amy, on the podcast who said chronic illness is a crappy person detector. When you talk to someone about your chronic illness, it's so common for that person to sort of just glaze over and be like, oh, I do not want to talk about this. I do not want to engage with this person about the thing that is hard. But, it's so important. It is so critically important. This is why I started Major Pain, because I was feeling this constant pushback when I wanted to talk about my illness. People didn't want to hear it. This is sort of like mixing the topic here. I'm a man and it's my story, but also I just think chronic illness in general and like wanting to talk about health in general is there's also a stigma against that.
Hello again. Before you dive into the rest of today's episode, I just wanted to say thank you so much for your support and for hitting that play button. If you want to expand on that support, here are 3 ways that you can do so. 1. Leave a review. If anything in today's episode resonated with you, or you would want to share about how the podcast changed your life, you can do so by leaving a review on Apple Podcast or Podchaser. 2. Check out our shop. The Rough Edges Shop is a faith based, women of color owned online shop where you can get a variety of products from tote bags, journals, t shirts, and more. 20% of the proceeds go to a mental health organization. So check it out at roughedgespodcast.com/shop. 3. Connect on social media. Rough Edges is on a wide variety of social media platforms, including Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, and more. If you want to connect outside of listening to the podcast episodes, you can do so on these platforms. If you have any questions, you can check out the episode description or stay to the end for more information. Now, enjoy your episode.
So this inability to talk about it became sort of twofold for me. And I became very internalized about it. It was a secret. No one really knew what was going on with me unless they had to. I would have really weird things happen where my body would stop working and I needed, someone to help me get home. I remember working as a leasing agent and I couldn't stand up one day and I had to get packages out of the package room for some residents. And I was literally rolling myself in my chair into the package room because I couldn't stand up. How do you tell people I can't walk sometimes and I don't know why? I was totally internalized for me. And then I, a couple years before COVID, when I was super flared up and like not really leaving the house, I wasn't really telling anyone what was going on. And I just felt like I started to fade away as a person, like fade from my own life and from my own community. And that's about the time when I started the podcast, finally just being like, this is what's going on. I am no longer going to be silent about this. I'm no longer going to bow down to societal pressures to not talk about this and to suffer in silence. A dialogue about it. And if you want to engage with that, you can. And if you don't have to. It changed everything so quickly because now I'm having conversations with other people going through similar things. I no longer feel like I'm losing my mind. It's like, no, these are common experiences. Doctors telling you that your physical problems are all in your head is extremely common. Blaming everything on anxiety. People who deal with something go through that before they can get to whatever it is that is actually the problem. They have to go through this process first. This is just a part of the process. The more open I became, the better I started to feel. And the more I started to find this community of people who cared and wanted to hear about it, it started to uncoil this ball of tension that had been living inside of me and just made everything better.
Yes, absolutely. And oh my goodness, it's so sad that doctors are out here telling people like, hey, it's probably all in your head. You just need to suck it up a little bit. I'm like, dude, you're a doctor. You're a medical professional. That's
Yeah.
just frustrating to
Yeah.
hear. And I'm sorry that it's a common experience also. You're right in terms of people just having this expectation that men are supposed to be these stoic masculine beings 24/7 and they can't express their emotions or even the fears they have in dealing with real life experiences. It's just so unfortunate that they're often suppressed and their voices are often not heard because we have this societal expectation placed on men to be a certain
Yeah.
way.
There's also so much societal pressure on women, and I don't want to compare more or less, but there's a lot on women, maybe more. And have interviewed so many women who have just not been believed. There's this weird thing in medicine where doctors treat women like they don't know what's happening in their own bodies. It's so dehumanizing. And
Hmm.
I've dealt with a lot of that as well. It happens to everyone, but it seems like because of these weird societal gender norms that are harmful on both sides, it's
Hmm.
just preventing people from getting care. Why are we doing this to ourselves?
Right.
Why are we forcing people to exist in this binary that is not serving individuals and keeping people from getting the care that they need? Let's just let people, be individuals, and live on the spectrum of whatever it is that we are and have empathy and care from doctors and believe patients when they tell you something's wrong. Yes, anxiety can cause physical symptoms, But that doesn't mean that it's just anxiety, that it's always anxiety. I hate the words just anxiety. Anxiety is awful. Let's treat
Yeah.
anxiety. The people that have anxiety, let's show some compassion and try to help them with that too. I've had horrible anxiety in my journey. The mental health toll of what I went through was massive, and dealing with the mental health challenges of it was a separate journey inside of the physical health journey that was as hard, if not harder, because you can do anything if you feel good about it, and you can't do anything if you feel bad about it.
Right.
Like the way
True.
you feel about what is happening to you is so critically important. That was a huge piece of my puzzle.
Yes. And while we're on that, because that was one of my questions I wanted to ask, how was your mental health affected by your physical health and everything that you were going through? And what was it like trying to manage both your mental health and your physical health?
Yeah, it's so hard to explain because it's so multi-layered. I'll start here. I would have these episodes where I would be overcome with bad feelings, and it could be like depression or anxiety or panic or just like this horrible weight that would settle on me. And it would sometimes come out of nowhere, and it would be sort of attached to like I suddenly don't feel so good physically either.
Mm,
So looking back, I'm convinced that MCAS flare up affects your mental state. And there's a lot of research around this as well. I mean, this is a thing, is like, having a flare up can affect your mental state. So I would have these mental episodes where I didn't feel like myself and I felt really bad. And I thought of them as externally bad. Like this isn't an internal thought. It's like I put a heavy blanket on me, and I didn't put it there. Someone threw a heavy blanket on me, and now I'm under this blanket,
mm,
and it feels horrible, and it's scary, and like I don't know why it's happening. And it's something I couldn't really talk to doctors about, because if I even hinted at anything like that, the first thing they'd talk about is like, oh, you're depressed and it's causing physical symptoms. Like that's all that they would talk about. And I learned that enough to know I couldn't bring this up with doctors.
mm,
So I had to learn how to like depersonalize it and kind of approach it like, okay, when those episodes happen, I just have to recognize them and wait them out. And
mhm,
I know that it's going to pass, and just get comfortable. For years, the only pain management I had was cannabis products, and I live in a state where that's legal. So I was like, give myself permission to have a weed gummy and play some video games or watch Star Trek: The Next Generation or whatever it is. Watch some Frasier, get my head right, get back into that calm, happy place, ground myself, and wait out this thing. And that really helped me. That like depersonalization, the externalization of this weight, learning that wasn't coming from me, but seemed symptomatic, like symptomatic mental health issues, separating that from who I am as a person, not assigning blame to myself, learning to accept it, embrace it, and wait and get through it was super, super helpful. That was a piece of it. Another piece of it is the actual, this is coming from me. I'm depressed about this. I'm anxious about this, and I'm angry. The anger, I think, was a really big piece of it. I am mad at these doctors. Like, I'm going to these doctors, I'm asking for help, and they're telling me it's my fault, and they're not going to help me. And that feeling of loss of control over my future and my body and my life, this is the only life I have. To be told that it doesn't matter and isn't valuable and
mm,
isn't going to get better, and it's my fault on top of all of that, like, that made me mad. So I had a lot of bad appointments where that anger would come out, and if you even like get a whiff of being aggressive towards your doctor, it's over. Like, you're not going to
mhm,
get anything from them. So I was fighting against all these impulses and urges and feelings that were not helping me. And good for me for feeling that, because that's important to feel. But I had to learn how to hide it. I built all these boxes around myself. And Andy used to question me about this. She's just like, the things that I wouldn't want to talk about. I'm like, I can't go there with you. I can't talk about the future with you right now. I'm so focused on getting through today. She was really worried about that, because it's like, it seems bad, right? To sort of compartmentalize all these boxes. But then once I got a diagnosis, I was able to open them up and empty them out, which was amazing. This was a survival mechanism. This is what I did, and it got me through. But it really came down to recognizing what is working for me and what's not. And the anger
mhm,
was not working for me. Depression and anxiety are never things that we choose. At a certain point, I realized that I did have some control over it. And the control I had was to focus on good feelings. I say this like I feel like my saying on Major Pain is joy is cumulative. If you can feel a little bit of joy every day, it will start to add up. I discovered that weed was helping, not just with the pain, but with the mental state. I had
Hmm.
nothing else to lean on. I'm not advocating for this or recommending this, but this is what I did. I became a bit of a stoner for a few years there. And when I was having a flare up, I gave myself permission to lean on the thing that made me feel a little bit better. It helped me kind of get out of that funky mental state. I realized that doing something that felt good every day was really important. So if my body wasn't feeling good, if my mental state was not good, I would put down whatever it was I was doing and focus on like what does feel good right now. And it would often be let's get outside, let's get some fresh air, let's put on a comfort show, let's tend to my farm in Stardew Valley, and trying to do it in ways that was productive if possible. And that's why I started the podcast to have something to do that felt good and chase that cumulative joy. I found after a while, not only am I feeling better, but my anger level is going down and my overall feeling of well-being is raising. And that was a big part of the transition, getting a wheelchair, leaning on accessibility tools, not forcing yourself to do something that's not working over and over and over again, admitting to yourself, okay, I need to try something differently, trying to approach life creatively and use my creativity to find ways to do things that are no longer working. And it just all adds up. And over time, the feelings of anger, impatience, depression, it all just started to fade. And I'd still feel those things from time to time, but it was no longer the overriding emotion. And then I got a diagnosis and it all changed.
Yes, wow. I love that you were able to practice that level of self-care for yourself because a lot of the times we think that if we do something nice for ourselves, it's like overindulgent or selfish, and we don't really realize the just the benefits that you can have from engaging in self-care and not to the point where you're just like, okay, I'm gonna do all of these things and just make myself happy on a daily basis. But it's more of like, okay, let me analyze what is working, what's not working, how do I get myself back to a place where I can feel like myself again. That is very important, especially when you're dealing with chronic illness and learning how to manage that and your mental health on top of that. It's just a lot of complexities. And so giving yourself permission to engage in self-care is very important.
Yeah, totally. And it was a permission thing too. It was very much of giving myself permission to lean into it. And also, it's not like I'm a follow your bliss person. But I am someone who believes you need to make yourself feel good. That's a practice. Joy is a practice, is more how I believe. But
Mhm.
a huge part of that is challenging yourself and doing things that are uncomfortable and pushing yourself and working hard and doing things that aren't necessarily like, it's not just about doing things that feel good and finding joy. It's also about building towards the future and pushing yourself and working. Now that I've gone back to work full time, it's been very interesting to me how joyful it is for me to work a full day. Whereas before, it's like, oh, this is taking me away from making music and pursuing my passions and my dreams. I don't want to be at work. But now it's like, man, I need it. I need to work. The ability to work is such a gift.
Mhm.
And to be able to put in a hard day's work and get paid for it and feel personal responsibility and that pride in a job well done. That was a huge piece of the puzzle for me, which is something that the podcast was able to provide. So it's not just like, oh, I'm going to play video games and hang out on the couch all day. No, it's like, okay, my backup plan for when my body fails me is to lie on the couch and play Stardew Valley. But until then, I'm going to try to do something productive and try to feel like my life has meaning outside of this apartment.
Yes, yes. I love that balance too between like, let me have some momentary pleasure of watching a comfort show, but then also let me do something creative and productive, something that will also bring me joy, but will have a net benefit for others too. So I like that balance.
Yeah, yeah, totally.
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about the stigma of men expressing their emotions and seeking help for their mental and physical health. If you could change two stigmas about how society views men's mental health and chronic illness, what would you change and why?
There's this feeling that when you're sick, it's your fault. And that's so wrong. That stigma seems to apply more to men's mental health. It's like if you're a man and you're having a mental health problem, it's your fault.
Mm.
And that's not right. There's no fault. Like if someone gets a cold, we're not like it's your fault. But some people do still, you know? If you're diagnosed with anything, there are people that are still going to blame you, which is ridiculous. I'm thinking of all these times that I've seen it happen, not just to me, but to people around me. My thing with mold, and my doctor telling me it was my fault. That's a really good example. It's not my fault. I couldn't do that to myself if I tried. There's literally no way to force myself to have one of those episodes. I have to be exposed to mold for it to happen, and it happens every time I'm exposed to mold. If it doesn't, it's because I catch it and get out of the room fast enough. This idea that there's fault involved in health, we do have a responsibility to care for ourselves. And the thing that is someone's fault is when they don't try to make improvement. Like, and I see that happen for sure. If you know there's something you need to do and you choose not to, knowing that it will make you worse in either a mental health capacity or physically, that's your fault, you know?
Yeah.
But like being depressed is not your fault. Being anxious is not your fault. Choosing not to go to therapy to try to manage those things, that's not even fault. That's a choice. There's no
Mhm.
fault here. But I do think, and that leads me to my next big one, which is that men need therapy and it needs to be okay. I love therapy. I'm so grateful for my therapists. It's so helpful. One of my therapists, my personal therapist, has a chronic illness and gets it and has taught me these, like cognitive behavioral therapy techniques to deal with anxiety. And it's been awesome. It's like, oh my God, I have a tool now. When I'm feeling anxious, I have a thing to do that helps. And that's huge. I think that it's changing with my generation and, the next generation even more so. This idea that men don't need therapy or can manage without therapy, or that it's not masculine to have a therapist. That's so stupid. Therapy's awesome. Everyone should have a therapist. Literally everybody should have a therapist. I don't know at what age that should start. It's different for every person, but I resisted getting a therapist for years because of this pressure for men to not need therapy.
Mm.
It goes beyond just gender norms and it's this sort of judgment of someone who has therapy as being like, "Oh, well, you're obviously not mentally sound if you need a therapist." It's like,
Mm.
"No. Every single person needs a therapist and there's something that everyone could talk about with a therapist that would improve their lives. We all need to externally process, vocally process the things that are bothering us, and it helps."
Yes, I absolutely agree with you, especially about therapy, because I was a person that also resisted therapy because of my cultural background. We're like, oh, you don't need that. You just drink some tea, you're depressed, you're good. But therapy is very beneficial, and you don't have to be in crisis mode to go to therapy.
Yeah.
Like, you could just have somebody to process big life changes with. Or if you're like, hey, I want to make this decision and I need a soundboard. Therapy isn't just for crisis mode, it's an external party trying to help you and give you tools to walk through life. So I agree
Mhm.
with you 100% that therapy is completely valuable and everybody does need it. Jesse, I want to thank you so much for joining me. But before we go, I have one final question for you. What advice or words of encouragement do you have for men who are struggling to manage or seek help for their mental health?
Yeah, that's a great question. Find a therapist if you don't have one, and that can be daunting and feels very hard. I've learned a couple tricks about that over the years. First of all, going through insurance is obviously very helpful. The last time I found a therapist, I went to Psychology Today and just searched for my insurance and then looked for chronic illness, and that's who I see. It really worked out. You can find an office that takes your insurance and just call them and say, this is the thing I'm dealing with. And whatever it is, I am a time traveler and I'm stuck in this time and I'm depressed. I can't go home. Call your therapist and say that's your problem and see who they think is the right fit for you. So, whatever it is that you're dealing with, there is a right fit out there. It's definitely okay to switch and try different people until you find the right person. I know what it feels like to be in a group of guys and feel like you have to code switch and be masculine and be a certain way. I've never really fit in with that as a guy. I enjoy it sometimes. Like when it's happened, it's like, oh, this is fun. I'm one of the guys. But I know what it feels like to feel like you are hiding a piece of yourself in that environment. Finding an environment where you can fully be yourself, find your community, your people. And oftentimes, if you have a particular diagnosis, mental health, chronic illness, disability, whatever it is, there will be communities around that. And that can be a great place to be yourself and open up. I've interviewed this guy, Joey Torre, on the podcast, who has a disease called hidradenitis suppurativa. He started a men's support group just for men to talk about having this disease. It's all about opening up, sharing your feelings, and having a place to be vulnerable. And it's so cool. Joey, you're doing it. These things exist. Look for support groups for your illness. I know there's all sorts of places to look for that. The Major Pain Podcast, share your story. Talk to me. Love connecting with people and hearing their journeys and putting that out there. Find a place that it's safe to talk about your struggle and talk about it and see what that feels like. That's what I did. I was afraid to do it. I built a place to do that, and it completely changed my life. It was instrumental in me eventually finding a diagnosis and finding this new chapter of health in my life that I didn't know was possible. And it just feels good. I was so worried about what other people would think. I'm going to be judged for being the sick guy. I don't want to be that. But that's not what happened. People come out of the woodwork and want to talk to me because they want to feel heard. And that is deeply rewarding. Like, what an honor to have people want to come on this platform that I've built to share their stories. There are places to share out there. There are people to share with. There is a community. It's just a matter of finding it. And that can be hard. That can be daunting. But the internet's a big place. And there's a community for everything now. Like, whatever it is you're into, old, like, tobacco pipes, books, certain authors, illnesses, diseases, disabilities. There's a community for everything. And it might just be about finding one person within that community that you really click with. You need to feel heard and seen and find that place where that's safe and then just go for it.
And yes, I highly recommend going on the Major Pain Podcast. Jesse, thank you so much for joining me on Rough Edges. If people wanted to learn more about you and your podcast, where could they find you?
Just head to majorpainpodcast.com and every single episode lives there. You can type in the search bar for a certain disease. If you want to hear from someone else with your disease, that is what this platform is for. To hear from another living being who lives with what you live with. And without the social anxiety, you can just tune in. At least you got to check out Sarah's fantastic episode, which was just a couple months back. Majorpainpodcast.com.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thanks again, Jesse. It was an honor having you on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's such a pleasure getting to talk to you again. I always have so much fun when we chat, and I hope we get to do it again.
Oh, absolutely. And everyone, stay tuned for more empowering episodes on Rough Edges. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Rough Edges podcast with Sarah I. Fox. If you want more updates on the podcast, you can follow on Instagram at rough.edges.podcast, or you can visit the official podcast website at roughedgespodcast.com. Thanks again for listening and have a wonderful day.